Hi, this is Ryan with Front End Audio, and thank you for checking out our featured software series. Alright, so today we're going to take a quick overview look at Slate Digital's Trigger. This is a virtual trigger drum sample replacement software. Looking over the interface here, immediately to the left, you have your browser window. This is where you're going to go through your sample files to find the different samples that you want to use. In this instance, got it open to some of the snare samples that you can see here. And you have a couple different samples per folder, and we'll go over that as we actually demo it in a later video. Looking at the top, you have immediately here is your input meter, and this will show the level of the incoming signal, and that corresponds to the fader just below it, so you can adjust the level, attenuate, or amplify the level of the incoming signal. Immediately to the center right here, this is going to show you your waveform. In real time, it's going to show the waveform of the drum track that you are using to trigger the sample, and it's going to correspond with the controls below that, which we'll go over in a second. Just to the far right here, we have the output meter, and that corresponds to the output fader just below that, where you can adjust the output of the triggered sample, whether you need to attenuate it or amplify it a little bit. Now, the three knobs here, what they are is, first you have your sensitivity, and that's going to adjust the sensitivity of the trigger to the incoming signal. You have your retrigger, and basically what that's going to be is if you say have some tom, like on a fill, you have a tom hit almost immediately after the snare hit, for instance, that tom hit may have a bleed in the snare mic and cause the trigger to false trigger. So you would have multiple snare hits when you only needed the one, so you can set up the retrigger in milliseconds on when it's going to, for a short period of time, ignore any incoming signal so that it doesn't false trigger another sample. Next to that, you have your detail, and this is actually going to kind of be like a threshold. For instance, if you have your waveform in here, you can see the two white lines adjusting, so that will kind of set the level or threshold for when the trigger is actually clipped and sends it to, or notifies the software to trigger the sample. Just below that, we have 6 empty banks, or, well, I have the Black Beauty plugin or preset set up at the moment, but you have 6 of these banks here so that you can, for instance, use a preset and have the various different miking positions of that snare sample or that instrument sample set up here and blend them together to create the final sound that you're looking for. And you can also actually clear it and input different samples. So you can actually mix and match the individual samples. So if you, say, wanted the room sound of a maple snare, but the direct sound of the Black Beauty, for instance, you could blend the two to create a new sample or a new snare sound. Below that, you have your volume fader, and this is going to correspond to which sample you have highlighted. As you can see, if I select the direct versus the overhead, the values are different. So this is kind of a mini mixer inside to adjust the balance between the individual samples that you have in your slots. Next to that, we have the pan, so you can actually, say, put up two room mic samples and pan them out, but have the direct sample in the center, so kind of creating a stereo image of a snare. Below that, you have your tune, so you can actually detune or tighten up the snare sample or kick sample, whatever sample you happen to be using, and tailor it to the music. Then you have basically your envelope controls. Your attack is going to be, how quickly the sample responds as far as the transient envelope. So you can have it, say, set to 0 for a real sharp cutting transient, or if you kind of want to add a little bit of a delay there, you can have it kind of fade in a little bit, which, you know, you could probably use for like room mics, and actually use the room mics more of like a reverb presence instead of necessarily part of the actual snare sound itself. The sustain is going to just do that, control the sustain. You can minimize the sustain or let the sample all the way open so that it decays and holds at the rate that the sample is, but you can fine-tune that if you need to create a little more space. And your release is going to basically just control how quickly it releases, how quickly and smoothly it fades out. So you can really fine-tune your snare sample here, and you'll see how as I adjust these faders, the window to the right reflects what sample adjustments you have made to it. Now below that, you have your dynamics adjustment, and you can control the dynamics and the velocity ratio independently, or you can link them together so that they work in tandem. And this really is kind of just the response of how the trigger works, because a sample on an acoustic kit is going to be dynamic. You're going to have ghost notes, you're going to have some hits that are louder than others, some that are quieter or softer, you know, medium pace. It's going to be across the board. So to keep that realism, you can adjust the velocity to dynamics ratio so that it has a realistic feel to it. You know, if you had it at 127, which is the top MIDI value in the velocity for the whole time, it's going to constantly give you that full strike sample, no matter how hard or how soft the original drum was played. So, you know, you want to adjust that to keep the liveliness, the realism to it. And that's kind of why I like to just link them together and adjust accordingly so that I can really, you know, fine-tune it. And for anybody who's worked with hardware triggers, acoustic triggers and hardware trigger to MIDI converters, is probably very familiar with that application there. So that is the basic overview of Slate Trigger, and hopefully you've got a better understanding of how the interface is laid out and what features it has. And again, thank you for joining us for our featured software series videos. For more information and for all your pro audio needs, check us out on the web at www.frontendaudio.com. Thank you.